Welcome back to episode 8 of Between Realms, and today we are talking about fictional hearts, how fan attachment shapes our reality. And today we are talking about our little fictional Cupid bow and arrow, our attachments to fiction characters and how it shapes our reality. So fanboys, fangirls, come gather around as we take a walk between realms. I'm your host Carrington. In today's episode, we are going to touch on the tender, complicated, and sometimes controversial parts of a fandom that we usually experience but rarely analyze. We're talking about falling for fictional characters, shipping relationships, objectifying fictional and real people, and the real-world psychological impacts of these behaviors. And this is not about judgment. It's about understanding ourselves and maybe understanding a little bit more about what we seek, what we fear, and what we need emotionally. Now let's first address the elephant in the room. How do we form real emotional attachments to fictional people? Psychologists Horton and Wohl coined the term parasocial interaction in 1956 to describe the one-way emotional relationship between audiences that they form with their media figures. At the time, they were talking about television hosts. And today, it is our book partners, our fan crushes, our I have a pass if this person ever gave me a chances, our video game companions. And we will be talking about Marvel rivals today. What's wild is your brain doesn't distinguish between parasocial relationships and real-world social relationships on a neurological level. So think back a couple episodes and remember when I said that your brain is not processing sensory information differently if it's real life, a book, or a movie? Same concept here. When you think fondly of a fictional character, the same brain regions light up as they would if you were thinking about your best friend. Evolutionarily, humans are wired for connection. It's a survival trait. The need for attachment and belongingness is so fundamental that it even stimulated relationships that can fill it. Simulated. The need for attachment and belongingness is so fundamental that it even simulated relationships that can fulfill it. Now, the positive impacts of these attachments. Emotional rehearsal. We can practice intimacy, communication, conflict resolution by emotionally engaging with character arcs. Increased empathy. Studies show that reading fiction increases the theory of mind, our ability to understand others' emotions and intentions. It also gives you a safe space to learn what you like and don't like in a relationship without putting yourself in physical danger. But this is not without psychological risk. Idealized fictional relationships can cause unrealistic standards for real-life love, and this is where reality can get distorted. When you fall for a perfect fictional person, you find yourself far less tolerant of the beautiful imperfections in real relationships. While these attachments to fictional characters can absolutely fill any void of something you are lacking in your life and provide you with emotional validation and belonging, it's important to maintain boundaries that do not isolate us from the real, messy, wonderful human connection. Now let's shift to the visual side of this fandom for a moment. How fictional characters' bodies are portrayed, particularly in franchises like Marvel. And I am focusing on Marvel specifically because it is what I am most familiar with. I am not as familiar with DC as I am with Marvel. I am not as familiar with anime as I am with Marvel. This is incredibly prevalent in all of these communities where every single character is objectified for their physical characteristics. It happens to both sides. It happens to everyone. I am just targeting Marvel rivals because that is something that I have direct experience with, I feel educated on, and I feel confident talking about. It is not disregarding that it is happening to other places. Please take what I am saying about Marvel and apply it to what you know best. I just don't want to speak about something that I am not educated on. Pretty much across all superhero media, you see hypersexualization of both male and female characters. Men are depicted with exaggerated muscular structure. I mean, like shapes that would never happen in real life. And women are depicted with all of these curves and itsy bitsy, all the my waist is so skinny, call the police, that's them. There are real life consequences to these representations that affect our internal view of ourselves, our view of other people, and how we view our partners. It also heavily reinforces gender stereotypes between men and women, but not many of you are ready to have that conversation today, I'm sure. Now, across many different video games, skins spark intense online debates because costumes are never just cosmetic. They represent identity, politics, gender norms, and body image ideals. And there will almost always be arguments for both sides. Is it empowering? Is it harmful to what we're trying to do here? And more than anything, it reinforces toxic beauty standards that we're already working so hard to scrub away in the rest of the world. When you take conversations like this seriously, our arguments over fictional outfits are not trivial. They reflect deep societal conflicts about who gets to be powerful, how bodies are valued, and what kinds of strengths are deemed acceptable. Fan art is an act of love. It is creative expression and expansion of canon. But like any form of creativity, fan art can also cross into murkier ethical territory, especially when it comes to hypersexualization. There are tons of positives to fan art. It can broaden representation, especially within marginalized communities. It can create new dimensions to beloved stories, really helping the people that people think differently. Some people are able to visualize in their heads, some people are not. I can, my father cannot. So having things like that adds something for all the different types of minds that are out there. And it really strengthens community bonds. It's fun where people can all look at an image and say, yes, that is what I see in my head. We are all validating one another that this is what we all see in our heads. Now, the negatives can lead to objectifying fictional characters, especially aged down characters. And a lot of times, while our stories are 18 and up, there isn't always a lot of regulation of things like that. So for younger viewers that are in our audiences far too soon, this can desensitize them to objectification. And I say this not to say that we are responsible for these younger audiences. It is impossible to regulate anything like that. But if you are somebody that is probably too young to be reading the books you are reading, please think about the long-term psychological impacts that it could have for you, and that is why I am making these videos. If we normalize sexualizing fictional people without context, consent, or boundaries, we risk normalizing it for real people too. There is a real life example I want to bring up, and I'm not going to say the creator's name. They're a very well-known book talk creator, and at one point in time, they were reading a book about a sports team, and there was that type of sports team in their general area and community. So they started going in person to these games. The owner, the stadium, whatever the arena space was called, started having her come in for promotions and things like that because she was bringing in new audiences for promoting the team because she was talking about the book that related to the sport that they were playing in the thing, and the team was using her for more PR, and she was, going to their games and getting into all this stuff. But she got into a very sticky situation where she was talking about the real life players on this team the way she was talking about the book characters. And then one of the wives of these players in real life comes online and is like, you're really going to behave like this when women across the world are going through all the things that we're going through in XYZ, and you're going to behave like this and normalize this online for your quite literally millions of followers. This story reminds us that when we dehumanize anyone, even under the banner of fandom fun, we are perpetuating harm. Fictional ethics shape real ethics, always. Obsession is where love curdles into something darker. Obsessive relational intrusion, ORI, describes behaviors where someone invades another's life through repeated unwanted interaction. When it's directed at actors, authors, or even fictional characters, it still follows the same emotional logic: the inability to accept relational boundaries. When a fictional character dies and the fandom erupts into rage or despair, that's grief. When a fan harasses an actor for playing a villain, that is an inability to separate fiction from reality. The psychological danger in this is that unchecked emotional investment can escalate into identity fusion, where a person fuses their identity with a character or fandom. This makes any perceived attack on the fandom feel like an attack on the self. Now, shipping is shorthand for relationshipping, rooting for romantic pairings between characters. On the surface, it's fun. Deeper down, purely psychological. We project our hopes, wounds, and fantasies onto these relationships. Wolfstar shippers, for a wonderful example, often resonate with hidden love, loyalty, and grief. Every ship tells us a little something about what we crave, whether it's safety, passion, healing, power, freedom. Knowing your favorite ship is like holding up a mirror to your deepest relational desires. A healthy level of projection onto a ship can give you some identity towards your emotional needs, especially if you're aware about what hole this is filling inside of your heart, helping us identify emotional needs, especially if you're in tune and aware of what you're reading and how it's making you feel. You're able to recognize what emotional need is this filling? What did I not feel before this? What did this fix for me? Or what do you feel when you're feeling drawn to read that specific storyline? What are you missing? What feeling are you craving? However, this can also create fantasy-driven expectations that real-world relationships simply can never fulfill. Now, there are definitely benefits to fictional love. As we've discussed the positive and negatives to everything so far, let's start with the positives. It does help build emotional literacy, and like I said before, it provides a safe place to practice trust and attachment. Further, it can be a safe place to discover more about yourself sexually. Now, reflecting on the dangers of it, it can inflate expectations for passion, conflict, or perfection in a relationship. It can also lead to emotional infidelity, depending on your relationship rules. And while fictional stories can be a safe place of practice, it can also start patterns in our minds that probably should not be replicated in real life. You see those jokes of they're being mean to me, they're doing this to me, and it's a negative thing. It's this negative thing is occurring. This person is causing a negative emotion, and that negative emotion is making me attracted to them. People have made multiple types of jokes about it, and it's not just jokes. We really should be concerned for our own physical and emotional well-being. We should not be attracted to the people that are mean or bully us or treat us badly. We should not be attracted. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to say should or shouldn't. Never mind. Let me give you a hypothetical example. Say you're a reader, you've picked up a new fantasy novel, and you have engaged in identity fusion with one of the main characters, and that character is currently going through an abusive relationship. They continue to go through abusive relationships. Because of that identity fusion, you are now, through them, experiencing an abusive relationship objectively. But like I said at the beginning of this episode and in episode 3 of my podcast, your brain is not, and I believe episode 5, your brain is not differentiating between this type of stimulation that it is. Your brain is going to respond to stimulation, whether it's real life, a book, or a movie, the same way. So maybe a less extreme example that's not physical. Say it's this constant push and pull. It's this toxic will they, won't they, you don't know what's going to happen. And then there's somebody in your life that reminds you of a characteristic of that character, and you start to form an attachment to this person in real life because they remind you of this fictional character. And because of this identity fusion, you feel feelings towards the fictional character that the person you have fused your identity to feels feelings towards. It's very complicated to explain it and unpack it this way, but like, I'm being serious, guys. You would be attracted to somebody that you're not normally attracted to, or would not be attracted to, if you did not have the narrative in your mind from that fantasy novel or whatever you read or watched. You would not be accepting or tolerable of certain behaviors that had not already been exposed to you from that storyline. So if you fantasize daily about a fictional partner and joke about your book partner, whether it's husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever you want to say, and mentally invest more in that person than your real life partner, that is emotional infidelity, even if it's socially accepted to a certain level. Emotional cheating is more about intimacy, secrecy, and emotional investment than it is about physical acts. Who watched that very scary Black Mirror episode of those two guys that were playing a video game together? You already know where I'm going with this if you've watched the episode, but anyway, there's two guys playing a video game together, and they're playing the video game, and they've like downloaded their consciousness, like they're inside the video game, like identity confusion. They are inside the video game. They are their characters in the video game. And they have wives. They claim to be straight and have wives in the real world, but go into this video game to engage in relations with one another. They're not touching each other in real life. They don't really talk about it in real life. It's a very interesting episode and I highly recommend it. I think about it too often. It scarred me. And what's playful or harmless in one relationship could be devastating in another. And let me play a video that came across my Instagram reels this morning. That's a perfect example of this.
Woman
Yeah.
that I talk about the way you talk about Joe Jonas.
I can't.
Exactly. It's fucked up.
I love Joe.
You're my wife! We are married till death do us part!
Unless Joe walks through that door.
That's false.
You know it's true.
That's
and we
false.
made that agreement.
Joe Jonas is like 5'3". I'll fight his ass.
Joe Jonas could be 2 foot.
He was clearly expressing that he was not okay with this, and she saw absolutely no problem because seemingly it's okay when there's no chance. She doesn't think she will ever in her life see Joe Jonas. If she sees Joe Jonas, he wouldn't even look at her. You know, like, it's not like she wasn't pretty, but like contextually, statistically, like, why, you know? Also, Joe Jonas, really? Anyway, the idea that you don't actually have a chance with the person doesn't necessarily make it okay, because it's still emotional infidelity, even if you can't do anything physically about it, you know? So same thing with a fictional character, one that's not real whatsoever. Think about if you are in a relationship and you talk about a fictional character to your partner and they came back to you and said the same things, and if that's something that's okay with you guys because you know it's fictional characters and you have those boundaries, fantastic. I'm so proud of you guys. That's amazing. I absolutely love to hear it. But if you're having conversations like that, maybe you should make sure your partner is comfortable with the way you like to engage with your content. Because in the same way that our brains are not differentiating the stimulation, it's also not differentiating if it's a real person or a fictional person that's satisfying our emotional needs. It just knows our emotional needs are satisfied. And by engaging in whatever you're doing intellectually, mentally, reading the book, reading fan fiction, making fan art, coming up with your own fan fiction storyline with the partner, with the fictional character, whatever you're doing, you're investing time into it, and it's filling emotional needs that your partner thought that it was their job to fill for you, and that was the relationship that they agreed to enter in. Fantasy relationships often skip the boring, essential parts of real love. In day-to-day relationships, you face finances, chores, health struggles, parenting disagreements. And the key fact of it all is that the number one cause of divorce remains financial stress. It's not falling out of love, not that it's not enough passion, always money. Fantasy never prepares you for that, because especially in books like ACOTAR, they all have an insane amount of money. They're fine. That is the last thing that they are ever worried about. Very often it's the last thing that they are worried about. But when you get to things like Hunger Games, where they don't have something like that, that is a worry. You see that actually play out in Peeta and Katniss's relationships as they deal with starvation, financial struggles, the risk of literally the stress of their everyday lives. That is a great example of that. But some stories like ACOTAR don't show the rougher sides of relationships the way it is expressed in Hunger Games. And when books portray love through obsession, jealousy, or even violence without modeling consent or healing, readers may unconsciously seek similar dynamics in their real lives. From the BDSM safety guidelines, fantasy novels that idealize kink scenes like choking without context or negotiation risk encourage real-world behavior that is dangerous without consent. Fantasy can absolutely model healthy kinks, but how often does it really? And when readers try to recreate unsafe scenarios without the proper education, it doesn't lead to deeper intimacy, it leads to pain and oftentimes fracturing in your relationship that can't be healed. More than anything, it's traumatizing you as a person, putting yourself through that. Like, I literally have seen videos of women be like, oh, the guy in the book does this, I want to try it, and he literally tries to like hold her up against, I'm sorry, you can't see me on camera, hold her up against a wall like this, and she's like, this is how they do it in my book, and she's like, oh my god, let me know that was a mistake. That was a mistake. But psychologically, you know, if somebody chokes you, you're like twice as likely to die. So like in your brain's instinct is to protect yourself now. Like you now have that like pathway that the person that was safe now caused pain, and that was unnecessary. Your favorite character is definitely not random. Psychologists have found that we are drawn to fictional characters who mirror our traits, aspirations, or personal struggles. For example, survivors of trauma often attach to the broken but brave characters. People longing for adventure attach to characters that defy the odds. Characters serve as both mirrors and maps. Mirrors because they reflect who we are, and maps because they show us who we might become. Loving a character can be like loving a piece of yourself or a piece of the future that you hope for. And as you know, oftentimes as we personally connect to a character, we also assign people in our real lives to characters within a book. And it's not going to be the same 5 people that are closest to you that you're trying to shove into the characteristics of the book that you got. It's, you got a new book, this character reminds you of this person. This is happening in your life right now, and the dynamic between your favorite character and this other person, that dynamic parallels something that's happening in your real life. So this allows you an avenue to deal with something that is happening in your day-to-day life, or it could cause more conflict, one of those negative risks that we talked about today. And now to bring it full circle. At the end of the day, our love for fictional worlds is not just escapism. It's a psychological phenomenon that reveals our deepest needs. The need for love, the need for community, and the need for meaning. Fantasy is beautiful, and a fandom is powerful. When we engage with awareness, we turn fantasy into a force for real transformative growth. Okay, I literally finished filming. Is this mic still on? I finished filming, and I'm sitting here going through TikTok, and I come across a wonderful video to add to this. So while my setup is still up, let's capitalize. This wonderful creator, KG, her ad on TikTok is Kayla.G21. She made a post talking about anytime there is a fictional relationship. She referenced Beauty and the Beast for one example. Whenever it is a human versus some sort of beast form, whatever it is always a human woman and a male beast, whatever it is. And I was like, oh my God, so we're just gonna...
human man paired with a disfigured animal.
Shrek, Edward Scissorhands, Grinch.
It might exist somewhere buried in some obscure indie film, but it's not mainstream. So what do you think that is? Is it because women are expected to love men past their flaws, while men are only expected to love beauty?
Ooh, Igor.
So uncomfortable with a woman being anything less than desirable, let alone being the object of desire. Because when the man is the beast, he gets a redemption arc. He gets love. He gets to be more.
There's a bunch of anime and like fairy ones.
Doesn't meet beauty standards. She's the villain. She's the witch. She's the joke. Or she's just invisible. It says a lot about what we...
I love that. I love that. I love that so much. So she goes on to talk about the beauty standards and how women are depicted as beautiful if they're good, terrible if they're bad. It's a very much an indication of what's on the outside is what's on the inside. So for men, it's not exactly the same. For men, they get to have this redemption arc. They get to have this opportunity to become better because men are maybe more flawed. Maybe as a society, we see them as more flawed. So they get this chance at redemption, whereas women, their choices are their choices and there's no opportunity for change as much. I'm really just like spitballing. This is just off the top of my head. I literally just watched a video and turned my camera back on and just started talking to you guys. I just thought it was another point to bring up and maybe throw in my video somewhere if it's not too much of an ADHD ramble. Thank you for taking a walk between realms with me today. You guys have to know how much I love this podcast if that makes me cry every time.